talking to kind of nobody. So I've been doing kind of like graphic design or digital art for probably about 2.5 years, maybe 2. And when I started, it was just because I saw like so many of my friends were drawing and it was really inspiring and I wanted to do it too. So coming from that all the way up until now, I've always been more proficient in just 2D drawing and creative drawing and things of that nature. When I went into doing digital art, I was really confident because I was like, I have that background of doing 2D art, so I can just translate that into digital art, illustrations, all that kind of thing. And that was not the case at all. Like, not even a little bit. It's actually super difficult because there are so many different ways of application when it comes to those two different mediums. You know, because with 2D art and painting and stuff like that, it's really easy to manipulate colors and blend because you kind of have everything in front of you. Whereas when you're doing digital art, you have to have a really solid understanding of color theory and complementary colors and the whole like situation of the color wheel and all that kind of stuff. I don't know why that was so hard to kind of explain. So there's a situation that I'm in right now. I'm gonna pull it up. So there's this situation right now where I'm working on this guy right here. So if you notice, this is actually from a video game. It's from The Second Life is Strange. And I don't know why, but I was really like this picture, the scene of the video game, like this scene really resonated with me. Just like his eyes and like the lighting and stuff, and also like he's just kind of like a really adorable character in the game. So I started looking up tips and stuff like that to see how I can kind of improve just this drawing as a whole. Well, I'm gonna list off first the areas that I think need to be improved. So the areas that I definitely need to improve on obviously are value with shading and blending, and then color in terms of also shading and blending. So I have a few videos up right here. I have a few, and I think they're actually all from Sarah Tepes? I don't know, but I actually follow her on Instagram. I love her art so much. It's like, it's so surreal, but has such a real element to it with the way that the skin is textured, which I love so much.
Little pro tip is I always use values that are a little bit darker, since it's easy to go back and use curves to lighten the image rather than this brush blends well when applying soft pressure. I have my finger on that all the time, so I always use the color picker. And the next thing that I do is I use very light pressure when I'm blending, and I use circular motions to do so.
Okay, so she says that she uses the color picker very often, and I'm assuming that that's for when she's going up in value. So I'm going to take that tip to heart. The thing is with this situation, which is why I'm kind of nervous, is obviously any real improvement is going to come with time. But me wanting to improve this image in just like a sketch or coloring session is kind of a bold statement.
Same with the eyes. I don't completely make a hard edge between the iris and the white of the eyes, because if you look at the eye closely, you'll see that the edge of the iris isn't like completely sharp and doesn't have a...
That is a beautiful tip, actually. So no hard lines for the eyes.
Also, a little tip I have is when adding highlights, I like to use a diversity of values. So for example, the brightest highlights will always be on the eyes, since, you know, obviously they're wet, and sometimes on the lips because I like to make them glossy. I think it looks cute. But
okay, highest values on eyes. Damn, okay. I think I've gotten the most info I could possibly get for as far as shading goes. So I'm going to go straight to this one where she's colored in grayscale.
Try to use the brighter colors on your color wheel.
Okay, so brighter colors on the color wheel.
I use the red curve to adjust the reds, the green curve to adjust the greens.
Okay, so she's using a lot of color adjustments to kind of situate the finished product. Okay, so for the tips that we're going to use for this drawing, we have no hard lines, specifically for the eyes. For the second tip, we're going to go darker and then use curve to lighten it up later. I'm not sure if Fire Alpaca has any curve options, but I'm going to explore that later and try. The third tip, we have use the picker constantly. So when I'm actually blending in the lighter values and the darker values, I can have more of like a consistent, like I can have more of an idea of the darker areas, the lighter areas. So I'm going to go ahead and do the speed portion of the video. Alright, so day 2 of this whole situation. So I went into this being super confident because I already had the hair grayscale down, but then when I actually started to go through the skin and try and add texture, a lot of the grayscale, the value that was lighter than the other was really blocky and it didn't really smooth really well. And then towards the end, when I was starting to get frustrated, I recognized that it's because my opacity for the brush was a little bit too harsh. So I'm gonna try again, this time with a lighter opacity. And I feel like if the texture is still not where I want it to be, I might just say fuck it and then just scrap the whole thing and try texturizing it a different way. So again, I have no hard lines, especially on the eyes. Generally make it darker. I don't know how well that tip is going to work now. I feel like, because Fire Alpaca doesn't have the same tools that Sarah had, so I might just skip that completely. And then there's using the picker. I did do that tip. I started using the picker a lot more often than I was, because when you use the picker constantly, it'll pick up the colors that are in between the lighter and the darker value that you chose. And then when I actually start coloring, I'm going to choose colors that are brighter on the color wheel that's provided on the program. So I'm going to try again, see where it lands me. Gonna remain a little bit more positive. We'll see what happens. we'll call it a fucking done ass piece. Yeah, there's like obviously a few areas that can be improved. Like, I feel like the overall skin texture could be a lot better, but considering that I've already been at this for 48 hours and I'm not trying to extend this sketch any longer than that, I'm just going to say, like, right here, it's fine. I'm also gonna export it. Gross. I think everything looks satisfactory. I do feel like with using those tips, there was a lot of improvement. Whereas if I hadn't used the tips, this probably would have been completely different. If I wasn't using those tips, I probably wouldn't have even used grayscale shading to help me out. But I do think that this looks okay, considering the time frame I'm trying to do this. So yeah, alright, thanks.